Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. Following his ordination in June of 1978, Joseph received many interview requests, not just from local newspapers, but from national news networks as well. We'll talk about his interview on the Good Morning America show, and it's going to be a very fun conversation. You won't want to miss it. Check it out.
Now, I want to share with you one story that's very interesting. We went back there, and my oldest son, I only had one child at that time, he got really sick. And I don't know, it might have been a cold and flu or whatever. But as we just had gotten there that first week or so, the baby just began crying a lot. And we hadn't found a church, by that time. And so I think the first week I probably went to church maybe with my parents or something. But we then began trying to find out where the church was located. And here our little son was just crying and crying night and day. We didn't know what was going on. My wife called the church headquarters in Salt Lake and asked, how could we find someone that held the priesthood. They referred us back to a gentleman named Bishop Abbey. He had just been released. I think he was in Fayetteville and then had moved to Greensboro. And so Bishop Abbey invited us to his home after, my wife called him. And that evening we went in, and he asked first, well, what can I do for you? And we told him, about our child was sick, and the baby was still kind of crying then. And he said, okay, I will give the baby a blessing. And he took the child in his arms, and it was crying. And he began to bless it. And as he blessed the child, he fell asleep instantly in his arms. And as he blessed him, he said to this child, you will serve a mission. And then as soon as he was done, my wife was just all over him. How is he going to serve a mission? We don't have the priesthood. And Bishop Abbey said, I don't know, Sister Freeman. I just know what the Spirit said. Wow. And then we moved away from North Carolina a few months later. And there we were, he living here. We were actually in the same state. And, but it was 2 years later.
Same stake as in here in West Valley?
Right here that I'm in now, yeah. And while we were in this stake, the priesthood was announced June 9th on a Friday. And my bishop called me, and also Brother Abbey called me that same morning. And Brother Abbey reminded us of that blessing. Wow. And he said, now your son can go on a mission. And the bishop called me and asked if I could meet with him that evening. He worked for the church. And so we met. And at the end of the interview, his name was Jay Swain. He said to me, Brother Freeman, I interviewed you with the temple questions, and so I find you worthy to receive the priesthood of God. And I also find you worthy to go to the temple and be sealed with your wife, your children, in the holy temple. And I thought, how wonderful. And then that was 2 days later, we were having a general priesthood meeting. And the state president interviewed me that morning, like 6 o'clock in the morning. And at the end of that interview, he said, Brother Freeman, at this point, he had talked to the state president, to the bishop, and said, we need to probably wait, give Brother Freeman 3 to 6 months holding the priesthood, and then can go to the temple. The bishop was not in the same thought pattern. He said to me, and I met with him that just the day before, that Saturday, and he said, I think everybody else in the church, when they joined in 1 year, they can go to the temple. And it should be that way with you. And I said, well, whatever, I go along with whatever the stake president say do. And he said, yes, that's right. We'll do whatever the stake president says. And so that Sunday morning, I didn't expect the stake president to sign the temple recommend because the bishop had already said 3 or 6 months. They're just going to observe me. And I had been a member 5 years. So the stake president, that morning, I felt something happen inside. In my heart, I felt as though angels were in that room. The spirit was just so powerful. And at the end of that interview, it must have taken almost an hour, he said to me, Brother Freeman, there's going to be a vote taken. And if no one can say anything against you, your bishop will ordain you an elder. Then you come back to my office and I'll sign your temple recommend. That was a wonderful feeling because I didn't expect that. Well, after receiving the priesthood, then I was able to stand in the circle and assist in ordaining 2 other brothers who were white, and they received the priesthood. Then there was a gentleman from NBC. I don't know how he found out, but he knew the night before, and he flew there to interview me, and he was a part of that meeting. And then he took me aside and said, you are the first black to receive the priesthood. How do you feel? And so I shared with him my thoughts and feelings in an old-timey tape recorder. And my wife was there with me. And then the story kind of broke. When I arrived back to my home, all 3 news stations came, one right after the other, wanting to do an interview. And the church gave me permission to speak with them. And so the roller coaster began. And that evening, I think I was traveling with the Genesis group, Brother Ruffin Bridgeforth and James Dawson. And I had just been brought in as a counselor to Bridgeforth. And we had 3 speaking engagements that day. So we went, I think, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and then we had one as a singles group that evening. And then we went back to the television station, and I think it was Sandy Gilmore spent about, it was I don't remember, I think it was a radio station. We spent a half an hour talking with him in an interview. And then that Tuesday, I got a call from Good Morning America. And David Hartman invited me to go back to New York for an interview. And so it was just a wonderful time. Many things happening like that. So things that I never ever expected to experience in my life. But it was just so beautiful. And then a few months later, Brother Bickerstaff and Sherry Dew came to my home and asked if I would consider writing a book. And so that's how this book in the Lord's
Why don't you go ahead and show that to us?
Yeah.
This is my used copy. Oh, if you can hold it up a little higher. There it is, in the Lord's
due time.
Lord's due time.
You
can tell it's well used. It was a used book, but I was really happy to get a copy of that.
Oh, yes. Every now and then I get a copy here and there. I used to have a lot of copies, and people borrowed them and never returned them. So I'm like everybody else. I have to call online or go to the DI and find copies like this.
Yeah, I got mine on Amazon. So,
Oh, yes.
well, and I have to. I'm going to confess. I think I told you this on the phone, but I'll let our audience know. So this is funny because I have probably my podcast has been going for almost 4 years, and for almost 4 years, I've been trying to get a hold of you. But I wrote a biography of you on blackpast.org.
I read it.
Did you read it?
You did a good job.
Okay.
Yes, very accurate.
I got it from the book there mostly.
Yes,
so
yes.
So okay. So hopefully I'm not a terrible reporter.
You did good. Yes.
So yeah, that's awesome. So what was it like to be? I mean, you're just kind of Joe Nobody, right? And then all of a sudden you're on Good Morning America. Were you on the Today Show too?
Yes.
And was it Ebony magazine? I think you were in there.
Yes. Yeah. No. I don't. I shouldn't say Today's Show. It was Good Morning America, and then Ebony did an article, and I don't know who did the thing of Britannica Encyclopedia, but it was in there, and magazines.
You didn't even know about blackpast.org, right? Until just a few weeks ago.
Yes, right. That's right. Yeah. So,
but I mean, you were that was before the internet, right? So that was your viral moment, right?
That's right.
Well, how was it to go from just Joe Member to all of a sudden you're on Good Morning America?
Well, one of the things that for me, having been a young minister, I was used to speaking, and so people began asking me to speak more and more, and I was speaking no more than anybody else in the church in the beginning, but suddenly I was speaking at least 3 times a week, and sometimes 3 times a day, and my wife and I and the children, we were just traveling. Every weekend, we would spend all day Sunday going someplace speaking, and those days, the church, you had a morning meeting and then you come back in the afternoon, and then you might have a fireside after that. And so most Sundays would be that way. I would speak somewhere in the morning or speak at a sacrament meeting and then do a fireside. So at least 2 firesides almost every weekend. Wow. And then sometime in the middle of the week, I would speak to a youth group, that is, our life was just busy like that. And then my bishop called me. He had been put in the stake presidency, and later he became the patriarch in the stake. And he said that the general authority, and I don't know which one, that had set him apart, said to him, he asked him, somebody told the general authority that Bishop Swain was my bishop, and he had ordained the first black that received the priesthood. And then that general authority said, well, how is Brother Freeman doing? And the bishop says, well, I don't know. He's so busy speaking and traveling. He said, well, tell him to slow down and become busy in his own ward and just be like everybody else so that he can grow in the church, and the church then can utilize him. And so the bishop called me up immediately and told me. I then immediately called. I had appointments 6 months ahead. Oh, wow. And so I called all of these people and told them, I needed to slow down and only speak once a month. And so that's what the calendar became. And even today, I try not to do more than that. But I'm not speaking as much like I used to.
It finally calmed down. Huh?
Yes, that's right. But, it was an exciting time. And not something to brag about, but to rejoice about. Rejoice in knowing that God had saw me, a little nobody, and then he blessed me to receive the priesthood. And it didn't matter whether I was the first or 151st. It just mattered that I had the priesthood. And it's the same way today. I'm just grateful to hold the priesthood.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So one thing we kind of skipped over there, you kind of alluded to it there. So June 9th was the revelation, which was a Friday.
Yes.
Sunday, you became an elder and
Yes.
received the priesthood. And then 2 weeks later, something pretty significant
Right.
happened. Tell us about that.
President Monson, while I was in New York, President Monson called my wife, and he said to her, I would like to seal your family in the temple. And my wife didn't know it was President Monson. We had another friend named Monson also,
Oh, really?
who was a tax man. He was an accountant, and she thought it was him. and he said, no, this is the general authority, Monson. And
he was an apostle at that time.
Yes, he was an apostle. And so she said, of course, we would love to have you seal us in the temple. And so I don't know how he found out for sure, but years later, a friend of mine told me that he had called the general authorities and asked if there was someone that would like to seal the first black that received the priesthood. And I guess President Monson volunteered to do it. And so he called us, and he set it up and made it happen.
And that was in the Salt Lake Temple, right?
Yes, that's right. Yes. So that was a wonderful occasion. I think we went to the temple like 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were there probably until maybe midday.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And, before, my wife always could attend the temple. And when we lived here, I would drive to the temple like 5 o'clock in the morning with our little children, and I'd sit out in the car with them and, babysit them, and she would go into the temple. Wow. And
because she was a returned missionary, right?
That's right. Yeah. So, it didn't bother me. I just accepted it. That's the way it was. But how wonderful it was that now I could go to the temple and we could go together and we could be sealed as a family. As we were with the Genesis group, there was a couple of ladies that were white who used to teach genealogy to the group. And I remember talking about being sealed. In the beginning, I thought, and I had a friend who said to me, he said, when you die, if you die first, then I will go to the temple in your behalf and have you sealed to your wife if I outlive you. But that couldn't happen. You could not seal black people at that time in the temple.
Right. You could only do baptisms for the dead, right?
Only baptisms, yes. And that's as far as it could go. So the sealing part was closed off. And when I began to talk with these ladies who were teaching, they knew and understood that all those records were put aside of black families, and nothing else could happen except baptism. So that was kind of disappointing. But still, I accepted that and said we will go as far as God will let us go. But the thing that I knew is this: the scripture teach in the Book of Mormon as well as the New Testament that God is no respecter of person. He loves all of us, black, white, bond, or free, and we are all alike in the eyes of God. And I knew that, and that gave me a feeling of confidence and a feeling of comfort. And so I didn't worry about the rest. And I accept the same thing today, in every aspect of my life. We are all alike before God. It doesn't matter. God loves us, and he allows us to feel his spirit, and he allows the spirit to speak to us. And we can be directed in our lives to do good if we will listen to that voice of the spirit. It will protect us, keep us from harm and danger, and it will be with us to comfort us through the greatest of trial and disappointment in our lives.
It's fantastic. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Joseph Freeman. In our next conversation, Joseph will tell why so many black families in North Carolina were very religious.
A lot of times, these black families, they would fall short of money. Their children might get sick. Farm people don't have insurance. and you got to go to the doctor. You seldom go to the doctor because there's no money to go to the doctor. So most of the time it was herbs and whatever you knew to do to create medicine yourself, to heal yourself, and lots of prayer. And so I think that's one of the reasons black people are so religious, because they learned to depend on God for everything. And you'd pray that sickness out and fast and then take whatever herbs that you knew to take for whatever sickness that you were going through.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, sign up at patreon.com/gospeltangents, and for $5 a month, you can hear the entire interview without any interruptions. If you'd like to see the whole video, that's just $8 a month, and you can sign up either at youtube.com/gospeltangents or on our website at gospeltangents.com and click the yellow subscribe button. Or you can go to patreon.com/gospeltangents, and I'll just need to make sure that we're Facebook friends, and I'll add you to our insiders group, and you can see the entire interview uncut. If you'd like to get PDF transcripts of our interviews, those are just $10 a month. And for just $15 a month, I will send you paperback versions of our transcripts as soon as they come out. Or, of course, you can buy them on Amazon as well. Go to Amazon.com and do a search for Gospel Tangents interview, and you can see all of our transcripts there. Don't forget to sign up for our updates at Facebook.com/gospeltangents. Of course, you can follow us at Gospel Tangents on Twitter. To hear our interviews updated to your podcast player, go to tinyurl.com/gospeltangents, and make sure you give us a 5-star review. And of course, you should show your support for Gospel Tangents with one of these cool t-shirts, like this green one, or light blue, sport gray, royal blue, purple, of course black, beautiful gold, and of course Utah red. I've probably left out some colors, but if you want to see more, go to gospeltangents.com/shop and you can get one of these. So once again, thanks for listening. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here we've got some more of our great videos. Thanks again.